welcome John Botica and Derek Grantham from the FMA. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Tricia. Kia ora, ata marie, morena.
So, look, I guess my first question, and probably no surprises, next month is 1 year on since we introduced FSLA in March 2021. And I'm pretty keen to hear from both of you, perhaps 2 to 3 minutes each, just your observations of this year's journey across the industry, across the advice sector, across advisors, across government, whatever. So perhaps if I could start with you, John, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tricia. It's really, quite surprising when you think this last year seems to have moved relatively quickly. But I just wanted to start our conversation this morning and talk a little bit about the wider environment. And we have some really quite big wheels spinning. So, of course, there's regulatory change, and as we know, that's about sort of licensing and competency for advisors. And as I said, of course, we're now halfway through the transition period for financial advisors. We also, of course, have the disruption caused by the pandemic, and there are ongoing challenges around how we work and how we connect with our clients. And lastly, we have the macroeconomic scenarios, that are really affecting our financial futures. But I think the really good news is that the financial system is, however, at least as solid as it was before the pandemic and actually before the regulatory changes came into play. And I see a sector that is one of buoyed optimism. So the increasing need for financial advice, we have the needs of baby boomers versus millennials. And then, of course, we have the Gen Zs that really don't know what they want yet. So, and we also have the challenges and opportunities that technology is bringing to our sector. And the one thing, an important thing, is the advice community has really been very resilient. It's stepped up when they needed to. And I also do sort of acknowledge the stress and anxiety that brings. But, most advisors got to the transitional gate, admittedly, some only just in time, but dug into the buckets of what they needed to do. And looking at the numbers of advisors we have in our community, the numbers and structures didn't really change very much at that first post through transitional licensing. And of course, that may change in the future. But we're seeing some signs already, some corporate models are starting to emerge. But importantly, we don't want to lose sight of small firms. They make up 50% of our market. And this does give us the opportunity now to lean into that, to help back a lot of those smaller businesses. And I'm talking here about, product providers, professional organisations like the FSC, together with MB and, of course, the folk here at the FMA. And firms also are starting to talk to us about how they bring new advisors into the industry, and I think that's a really good sign. And firms are also starting to accept that increased regulatory attention is expected. So the intention is to drive better outcomes for consumers, bringing more people to understand and the opportunity to be included. So in other words, to get the help that you need to not only make informed decisions, but actually the right financial decisions. So overall, I'm really pleased to see advisors getting on with what they do best. And that's providing advice, that's being a valued partner and friend to their clients. I'd also like to acknowledge the willingness of advisors to engage with us. And that's certainly something that has changed over the past few years. And that's very important. And so while ultimately our job as a regulator is to ensure safe and sound practices, compliance with laws, compliance with the regulations, I believe we become a more effective regulator when we're talking to firms outside of those serious processes. So it's about preparing for the future together, trusting each other, and being respectful of each other. So I'll hand over to Derek for some of your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I probably can add just one or two comments to those excellent remarks. And I think as I look across the sector and I look to advisors and I look to firms, I'm really seeing some standout things that I think are worth mentioning. And perhaps when I look at the sector, the biggest standout to me is that I don't think I've ever seen, as I've seen now over the last few years, the amount of support for financial advisors from within the sector. You know, if I look at providers or the groups, many who are on the call today, I'm sure, and advisor associations, the way in which this sector has rallied around advisors, I think needs to be, in my opinion, acknowledged and celebrated. So I think that's a really healthy sign. And still with the sector, there's something else too I've observed, and that is how that sector, those people I've mentioned already, those groups and the providers and associations, how they've tirelessly engaged through the whole change and through the review and through the consultations. They have day jobs to do, but they continue to, all the way through, just engage, give a voice to the issues, and it became so critical and so important. And also, still at the sector level, finally see a sector that is actually growing in confidence every day, around confidence in the services, what you have to offer consumers. And then if I go to the advisors at that very sort of individual level, I kind of seeing people who have clearly been doing it tough, I think, through very stressful times. New regulation has been challenging, I think, for all of us. I mean, there's new language, there's new terminology, there's new concepts that somehow we've all had to, all of us, I think, get our heads around, and the advisors and the firms have had to actually implement that in the real world. And then if I look across firms, I'm seeing some really strong, healthy signs. If I look at advice firms, they have today, I think, a much clearer view of what they need to do, what they need to look like to meet the demands of the future, how they're going to do that. And I think through licensing, many of them now have a structure in place to enable them to do that. And I think the winners, or at least one winner of all of this hard work that's gone on in the last few years, has got to be surely the consumers. So I think what I'm saying in summary then is that we're seeing a really strong sector that's actually working together really, really well. And I think it's set to achieve good things, Tricia.
Great. And I think an important thing there to note, as you rightly say, John, the increasing need for consumers and members of the New Zealand public to get financial advice. Because last year you introduced to us the report card, and I noted yesterday through your latest communication that came out from the FMA that we had around 300 full licence applications that had gone through. So I thought, let's have a look at this report card. And John, if you can take us through it and kind of tell us where we're sitting at now as a community.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tricia. So, I think it was a really good opportunity. As I said, we're now halfway through the transition period for us, just to sort of check in around, how well we're going. And the first comment I'd like to make is to really just acknowledge that we have a very strong industry. So with over 3,000 firms, providing advice, and we have around 9,500 financial advisors. And so whilst some are talking a little now about perhaps leaving the industry or retiring, we're not really seeing any of those sort of, we're not seeing that sort of come through on the numbers. So a really fantastic start to the new regime. And the other good news is we are receiving daily licence applications. As you say, Tricia, we're up to around 300 also approved licences. So around 17% of the market today, has licensed. So that's really good news. And the other thing is around some really stellar feedback around the licence application portal, how very easy it is to navigate through. And together with that, our how-to guides on our website are a real hit. They are the number one, draw down to our sort of website. Many advisors telling us how they're using those to help them prepare for their sort of license application, and just how useful and effective that they are. The next one I put on our list is disruption over the last year. I've actually put that down as a positive sentiment, and whilst I do acknowledge that it has been stressful, and advisors have, really been feeling that, and it has been actually very, very hard. But the positive thing about that is the resilience for advisors, and how they absolutely have stepped up, and how very, very strong we can all see and experience just what the true value and the benefits of financial advice are and have been. The other thing we're seeing is, a lot of financial advice providers are really now starting to focus on their futures. And a lot of them are looking at their structures, but thinking quite strategically around what that means for their business and the value that adds, the demographics that we have that they're sort of working in as well, and really trying to think around what that means for them moving forward. And we're starting to see a few tilting towards Class 2 licenses, so those where you have advice businesses with more than one advisor. So certainly our license statistics are tilting towards that sector. And the other thing we've found is, in feedback that we're getting from advisors who have successfully applied for their licenses, that the time they've actually spent focusing a little bit internally, focusing on their processes and procedures within their businesses, has really been quite positive for them. So it's given and bringing a lot of discipline into helping to run their businesses a lot more effectively. So if you don't mind, Trish, perhaps if we could pass on to the next slide. So here, let's just a little bit around, so some of the areas of focus that we're sort of seeing as well. I sort of mentioned before, with the numbers and daily license applications that are coming, and they are tilting towards Class 2. So we can't forget that the Class 1, which are the single advisor businesses, which make up half of our market, those applications are lagging currently. So that's really, as I sort of mentioned before, the opportunity for us to lean in to be able to help the sector as much as we possibly can. So sessions like we're running today, a lot of the other webinars and classes that we're running, our visits and contact with advice businesses as well, to give every support we possibly can, to encourage advisors around the journey they need to take to get ready for applying for their license. And we have a small number of applications still coming through that don't make the grade. And a lot of that has come from those that actually just haven't put in the amount of work they need to get ready for their license application. So whilst the portal itself is relatively straightforward to use, there is a fair amount of preparatory work that people need to put in to be able to do that. So it's clear from some that they effectively haven't really thought deep enough around sort of what that means for them as well. And that really just adds further delay to the process and stress that you need to go through. And the other thing is to don't overcook it. So it is, we challenge advice business to say, is it really the time for a different approach? It's really about sitting down and thinking around your business, strategic thinking, as I said before, but really just documenting the processes that you actually engage with today. We're not looking for people to overly polish or look perhaps to things that they think may impress us. This is about your business and telling us what your approach is actually about. So there's no fear when it comes to that. We also have digitisation and the search for talent. As I said, people are talking to us about bringing new advisors into the business, but we understand the environment that we're in, that is exceedingly difficult to do. And so again, it's a lot of us thinking quite carefully around how together we can actually find the solutions and what that means. We also have the generational thing, as I said, so the baby boomers who prefer human interaction, millennials perhaps preferring remote, and I said the Gen Zs just really not too sure. And again, that means for us it's a very diverse market in which we operate. The future of financial advice, whilst it's extremely bright, we need to accept that the way in which we engage, the way in which we actually the way we run our businesses will change in the future, and we need to accept that and step up to the mark to make this industry as healthy as it possibly can be. And lastly, I'll just say, to those who perhaps haven't yet started the journey around thinking of their licenses, and as I mentioned, there is a lag in that, the single advisor businesses sort of coming through at the moment, is to really focus on and have a plan in place around what it is that you need to do. Some advisor businesses are telling us that they're dedicating 1 or 2 hours a week, to put aside to really focus on some of the steps that they need to do. So whilst we've put in a target date of 30 September, really encourage businesses to consider that very carefully. That gives them the time, perhaps, if we need to get back to them to discuss their license application. There'll be no pressure actually to get it right when it comes down to it. So we're really asking everyone to don't risk the future of your business by leaving it too late, and to get in on time. So thanks, Trish.
Thanks, John. And look, I'm getting quite a large number of questions coming through, and you've kind of answered one of these questions within what you've just talked about. But what are the biggest challenges that you see for advisors in, I guess, in meeting their ongoing licensing applications? I mean, do you see any weak areas there and any areas that you're concerned about?
I think at this point, when we're looking at some of the license applications that are coming in or some of the questions that we're receiving, it's really that a lot of businesses, are starting to panic a little bit to the degree in which the amount of effort that they're needing to put in, or the depth in which they sort of need to start documenting. Again, we come back to saying that it's really just thinking about what you do today and the process that you have. Many and the most of advisor businesses we have today are successful. They are successful businesses. They have happy, well-informed clients. So something is successful in the way advisors are running their businesses. So we're just asking for them to document those things around, how they do things. Think about it from the perspective of good business practices. If I'm running a business, I do need to have a BCP plan in place to go when something goes wrong, but be really practical around sort of what that starts to mean for you as well. And it's really just thinking around putting the client at the centre of everything that you do. And if you start to think about the client being the nucleus of what you do, then all of your activities that you engage to support your clients as you come through, that's all you need to start to think about sort of through there as well. So I don't know if Derek, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think perhaps one thing I can add, you could point to any number of obstacles that people might be experiencing right now, but if I was to point to one key obstacle, at least that's apparent to me, sometimes I think it's in people's minds. And so I think that in the conversations that I'm having, people worry a lot about whether what they've done is good enough. And so they're constantly looking over their shoulder. And then it's often they're looking in the wrong direction. And it's kind of just continuing that sort of inertia and that fear of actually moving forward. It's interesting, I was talking to an advisor just the other day, and I asked him, who had got his full license application, what motivated you, to get on and get this done? And I was really taken back by this amazing comment. He said, because I wanted this year to be the year where I can focus on the things that I really love, which is doing what I do best, which is getting on and helping customers. And so that motivated me to really push through and get this done. And sort of the thing that I've observed as people have gone through this process has been quite interesting, is that often you don't quite know where to start. But one question that I'm hearing that people are asking themselves as they work through the process is, how do we do things around here? And they're saying that this has created some really interesting conversations internally and really interesting debates and dialogue. And this is where they point to as being the greatest value in getting ready for licensing, is that one question and actually working through that. Yes, at the end, the output is these wonderful policies and procedures, which are of value, but it's the most value that people are finding is actually making that start, having that conversation. And I know some have, used really simple flow charts to kind of start to pinpoint the various aspects of their processes to really understand it and really sort of work through it. And while some advisors may have had someone else help them to write up the policies and procedures, one clear message has come back from advisors is you as the advisor, you need to be right in the middle of that, directing and controlling that conversation. And I think at the end, a lot of people are telling me there's just been so much value in that process. But I think what they're also saying is you really need to have a clear view of what's required. You know your business best, so where are you placed on that spectrum of what's required and how much effort is now required to get that job done? And actually, as John has said, and I think that's really important, is you need to have a goal. Set a goal for this year, if you haven't already, to get this done, have a plan. And there are plenty, and I've talked about this already, another thing that I'm hearing from advisors is there's lots of resources out there to help them. And what they're talking about, which I think is really interesting, is the consistency and the resources that are available wherever you go. And so that's not creating sort of confusion and issues and problems. People are getting a consistent message about what they need to do. So I just encourage everybody to move forward. Thanks, Tricia.
I think you've answered sort of my next question really around what models look like, what do the client offers look like in their governance. So you've said, I think you've just described business, what they're actually doing. So that's really good. What are the technical aspects of the licence application requirements, if any, have caused applications particular difficulty?
Well, I think we tried to sort of anticipate that, Tricia, in some ways. We've developed, as you know, some self-assessment tools where we looked at where would be the areas that we thought people would potentially struggle the most. Where would be the hard sort of heavy lifting? And so, we've done, we released 4 assessment tools so far where we've identified those areas and we've got our ear to the ground and there's more to be done. We're certainly committed to doing that. So you've seen them from memory. It was record keeping, was key outsourcing arrangements. They were 2 critical areas. Of course, another one is cybersecurity and BCP. And then just finally, there was sort of the customer care, managing conflicts of interest. So we're very focused on trying to focus on where the areas where people are going to struggle. But I don't know, John, whether anything else you'd add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, as I sort of mentioned before, I suppose the daily hits that we're starting to get on the website where people are actually downloading those tools as well. So that really tells us that their advice businesses are actually engaging on what they need to do. And the other good thing is our licensing tool, where you can start your licensing journey, but you don't need to complete the entire application in the one sitting. So you can actually use the tool as a bit of a tutorial for yourself as well, together with the other tools that we have. And you can go in and start to answer some of the questions. You can skip forward to other sections where you may be prepared, save them and come back. It doesn't matter how long, in which you take to actually, go through the process and before you actually submit to us. We cannot see any of the drafts and any of the information that people are using. But as I said, it's really good to hear, they're using it as that tutorial, to help themselves through there as well. So, one of the other questions I get asked is, with the level of applications that have come through so far, so 17% sort of halfway through, and I'm encouraged. It's not about the number that have been approved. I'm more encouraged by the traffic I'm seeing where people are starting to engage and to be able to prepare themselves. And for us and our whole team here at FMA, we are absolutely available for anyone who needs help through that as well. And whether or not people are contacting us through questions at FMA, and if they want us to bring them back to help them through, team are very, we're very willing and happy to be able to do that, at any level, sort of through there as well. And I said I am encouraged with the traffic that is starting to come through.
I guess I've got a couple more questions, but that's a good segue, John. So your presence and profile over the next few months, with September 30 as a key date. Are you planning, and again, you'll be guided by the pandemic and guidelines or whatever, but is your plan out on the road or do some webinars or what is the plan?
So maybe if I make a start, and really there's three things, Tricia, and John can jump in. So three things. One is we've been making ourselves recently really available to groups that want us to talk to their advisors. So we've been doing webinars, we've been turning up to team meetings online and talking through licensing, demonstrating the licensing portal. So that's one way in which we've been sort of engaging the market. The second way is we've been talking with various providers about how, and I talked earlier on about this amazing collaboration and teamwork within the sector. So we've been looking to partner with various providers to help us reach audiences, hopefully in interesting and different ways, but very targeted. So that's the second way. And the third way that we're looking at is hosting events where we ourselves are going to target the greatest needs. So we can tailor that to, or have webinars that are tailored to particular parts of the market, or even to particular topics, such as how to apply online for a license, or to those self-assessment tools I've talked before, and unpacking them a little bit more. So we're looking at sort of three sort of core ways now. And of course, ultimately, what we really want to do and would love to do is to get out in person across the regions in time and have more one-on-one discussions and get more sort of closer to some of the issues and help. But John?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you say, Derek, the thing is we'd really love to be able to engage more face-to-face, but and we hope in the near future, that's possible for us to be able to do that, right across the market, right across New Zealand, sort of as we can.
Yeah.
We've got time for a couple more questions. So one I've had here is, how many Class 3 licences have been issued so far, and what are their biggest challenges?
Class 3, 10, I believe. So there are around, the population of Class 3 is estimated to be around 60 entities who are likely to apply for their Class 3 licence. And I said 10 sort of through the door at this point. Most of those, of course, are larger corporatised organisations, as in the banks and the insurers. So, these are firms that engage nominated representatives. And as we understand with our discussions with those organisations, their emphasis at the moment is a lot around the training of their staff and the modules that they're actually starting to bring in, and how it is, the levels of competency that they're needing to bring in for their financial advisors or nominated representatives as they're moving sort of through that as well. They're also looking a lot around their reporting and their dashboards within their business as well. So these are complex businesses, and they're looking at the way in which they engage and really around the data and intelligence they're actually collecting, through their engagement sort of with their customers as well, which comes through into, as I said, their dashboard reporting and activities, that come through as well. So they're actually understanding, the level of advice that's been given or the quality of advice that's been given. So they're tracking a lot of that. So that's where most, I think, they are concentrating on at the moment. And as I said, we've set a target date 30 June for those providers. And being a small number, we are in direct contact with each. And in all cases, they are gearing themselves and focused on getting their applications in by 30 June.
Great. Look, last question and a minute to each of you. What are your messages to those people that maybe haven't started the process yet or are midway through it and not probably giving it the attention it requires? So any final comments? So a minute each, or start with Rick.
Well, really, I think the message for those that haven't started is really interesting, because if you talk to some people, they'll say there's lots of time left. And of course, on one hand, that's true. Then if you talk to others, particularly advisors who've been through the process, they might tell you something different. They might say, hey, you know what, there's not a day to waste, get moving. So, and I think really it comes down to you know your business best, and you've got to figure out what are the requirements, where are you placed in relation to those requirements, and what's the quantum of effort required. And as John's mentioned already, have that plan and to make sure you get across the line. And so I think, this is sort of we really need to put your attention right now is actually on that sort of gap analysis of where you're at, John.
Yeah, look, a very simple message. We are halfway through. There's 12 months remaining, so don't risk it. So have a plan, think about it. If you are struggling, no matter what it is, there are many places you can go to get help through that as well. So your professional body or organisations. And here at the FMA, as I said, we have a team here that are absolutely willing to engage and to help. No matter what the problem is, no matter what the question is, we are here to help. So, if you're apprehensive about getting in touch with us, please don't. We really are quite friendly when it comes down to it.
Thank you, gentlemen. We clearly had a lot of other questions that we couldn't answer. So as you've just rightfully said, get people to come to you. You've got a team there that can help and support. So look, I'd like to thank you both for your generous time this morning. Look forward to seeing you out on the road around the rest of the country very soon. And once again, thank you for your time.